I'm trying. I'm learning.
They say change is good, that reinvention is not only necessary, but is also kind of sexy. That nothing makes you grow as a person, like packing a bag, getting on a plane, and starting over fresh in a completely foreign country. But what they don't tell you is that starting over actually feels a lot like closing all the tabs on your laptop and staring at a blank screen. At first, it's really unsettling. You no longer have any familiar shortcuts. You have no saved progress. You can't just pick up and go from where you left. Now it's just you and all this pressure to figure it all out again. But then, little by little, you just start opening new tabs again. And this time, they're actually exactly the ones that you want. 1 minute you're in your home city. You are surrounded by familiar faces, by familiar streets, familiar routines. And then suddenly, you're not. You are now in Bangkok, where the only familiar thing is the Grab app, and that's only because it fits you. And that's when it hits you, that this is not just a vacation. You don't have a return ticket. You are actually doing this. Starting over sounds poetic in theory. In practice, it's, well, equal parts exhilarating and terrifying. Because here's the thing, when you leave everything behind, you don't just lose all the bad stuff that you just couldn't wait to get rid of. You lose the good ones too. You lose the Sunday brunch that turned into your new ritual with your best friends, the cafe that they knew your order, the Sunday barbecue at home where the conversations were always the same, but somehow they never got old. The best friends who finished your sentences. You get to lose a city that wasn't just a place, but a collection of moments that were all tagged into cafes, streets, and familiar faces that really felt like home. But on the flip side, starting over means that you finally get the chance to build the kind of life that you used to scroll past on Instagram and you used to save it for later. The kind of life that just felt out of reach back home. You are now no longer boxed in by who you've always been. You get to ask yourself, who else could I be? What does the happier, freer, more fulfilled version of me actually look like? And what if she's not some far-off fantasy? What if she's just one decision away? Because maybe part of the reason you did this was so you'll have stories to tell. Whether it's to your future kids or just to your best friends over wine. Or in our case, tea. Maybe you just wanted to be the person who actually went, who actually tried, and who didn't just say, someday. The first few weeks in a new country are a little bit like the honeymoon phase of a relationship. Everything feels magical. Everything feels like it's full of color. The food tastes better, the sun shines brighter, the air smells different, even the people are friendlier. Even the traffic sounds like this beautiful background noise in your movie-like life. And then reality sets in. Just like in relationships, the flaws start to show, and that's when the real person comes out. The language barrier that once seemed this charming thing now becomes this frustration thing. The exotic cuisine that thrilled your palate now has you longing for a simple salad. The streets that felt once so alive and so full of possibility, now they just feel, well, overwhelming. It's in this phase that you start to question your decision. Did I maybe over-romanticize this move? Was I blinded by all the allure of the unknown? But here's the thing about both relationships and moving abroad. It's when the rose-colored glasses come off that the real growth begins. That's when you start to adapt and to find beauty in the imperfections, and you start to appreciate the nuances of your new reality. And slowly the unfamiliar becomes familiar. You start to recognize routes, you start to recognize roads, you even start to know how to take the BTS. This foreign city starts to feel a little bit more like home. And that's when you realize that the end of the honeymoon phase doesn't mean that it's the end of the magic. It's actually the beginning of a deeper and a more authentic connection. Just like any real relationship, if you push past the fantasy, you might just fall in love with what's actually real. So why do we do it? Why do we leave behind the comfortable, the familiar, the easy for the unknown? Some would say that it's the thrill of reinvention. The idea that basically in a new city, you're no longer bound by your past. No exes, no old reputations, no expectations, no old habits. It's just you in your rawest form with this blank canvas. Others would say that it's escapism, that starting over is just running away in a more socially acceptable way. That if you can't fix what's broken, you can at least distract yourself with some street food and some rooftop views. Maybe it's both, maybe it's neither. Or maybe it's simply about proving to yourself that you can do hard things, that you are adaptable, that you're resilient, and that you are capable of turning any city into home, whether that takes weeks, months, or even years. I couldn't help but wonder, is living abroad really everything we imagined it would be? Or is it just the illusion we chase to convince ourselves that our lives aren't complete yet, and that maybe, just maybe, the answer lies somewhere far from where we are? In my case, I really did believe that happiness lived on the other side of the world. Specifically somewhere between a mango smoothie and a beach. Leaving Cyprus with my boyfriend wasn't impulsive. It was actually strategic, I promise. We were both frustrated, we felt a bit stuck and suffocated by the slow pace and the same conversations of a place that no longer fit the people that we were trying to become. We were actually craving movement and structure and stimulation all in the same place. And if we stayed any longer, we knew that the stillness wouldn't just stall our growth, but it will actually start to reverse it. So we packed our bags with all the essentials: our laptops, our vitamins, the emergency first aid kit, and of course all our expectations. We expected structure, productivity, just a fresh start. We didn't just want to change our surroundings, we wanted to change ourselves. And we thought that if we changed the place, the person would follow. After all, how could we not thrive in a place where you can order groceries, dinner, and a dentist appointment without ever leaving your building? And yet, even in the most convenience-packed city in the world, we still had to face the most inconvenient truth. And that was that we brought ourselves with us. The very first week, we realized that the gym we romanticized online was less state-of-the-art and more just bad state. And that was just the beginning. Because even when everything around us looked new, we started to feel that the patterns still felt familiar. The procrastination, the slow mornings, the same excuses, but now in a different time zone. We kept looking around and waiting for the change to kick in, only to realize that the change doesn't live in the city. It actually lives in all the daily choices that you make inside it. And that was a turning point. Because here's the thing that no one tells you about moving abroad. The new place won't automatically make you a new person. It will hand you the opportunity to become one, but you still have to show up and meet her. The version of you who wakes up earlier, the version who creates, who builds, who focuses, who follows through, she doesn't arrive at the airport waiting for you. She arrives slowly. She arrives with each uncomfortable decision, with each new habit you get to keep even when no one is watching. With each moment you choose growth over distraction. So no, moving abroad won't complete your life, but it might give you the quiet, the space, and the reason to finally complete it yourself. And maybe that's enough to make this chance worth it. So is living abroad everything we imagine it will be? Well, here's the thing they don't put in the travel vlogs. We think that if we go somewhere more exciting, more beautiful, and more alive, that then we will become all those things too. I mean, better place, better you, right? We tell ourselves that once I'm in that city, I'll finally be the girl that lives the life that I want to live. The one who wakes up early, who journals in the morning, who meditates, who goes to the gym every day. That productive girl that has her S together. Listen, for a while, maybe you do feel like her. Everything will feel shiny, curated, aesthetic, and the more aesthetic the city, the more aesthetic you will feel. So, it's easy to believe that this version of you is going to be permanent. But what happens 3 weeks in? What happens when the honeymoon phase fades and the city becomes less of a fantasy and more of a backdrop? When you catch yourself carrying the same old habits, the same procrastination, the same fears, the same excuses, now just dressed in a new time zone. When the new you doesn't just magically appear like a wardrobe change, that's when the real work begins. Because, as it turns out, it's not the place that changes you. It's what you choose to do with the space that it gives you. Moving abroad doesn't rewrite your story. It just hands you a blank page. You still have to pick up the pen. You still have to do the rewriting. And that blank page, it's both a gift and a mirror. It shows you exactly what you've been carrying. All the good, the bad, and all the things that you thought you left behind at the airport. But it also shows you what's possible. Because maybe the answer was never in the city. Maybe it was in who you decide to become wherever you are. And maybe you don't need to be somewhere aesthetic to feel aesthetic. Maybe you don't need to be somewhere new to feel new. You just need to start showing up for yourself. Like the version of you have always imagined it was waiting at the end of the runway. Not because the city made you her, but because you finally stopped waiting for the city to do the work.